Hello and welcome to India's World. India and the US have signed an in-principle agreement for sharing military logistics. The agreement will give the two nations access to logistics support from each other besides refueling and berthing facilities. The US has always said that if India wants transfer of high-end technology, it needs to sign three foundational agreements. These agreements are: 1. A logistics support agreement or LSA, 2. A communications interoperability and security memorandum of agreement (SISMOA), and 3. A basic exchange and cooperation agreement for geospatial cooperation or BECA. Although the LSA has been under negotiation for nearly 2 decades now, the previous UPA government, especially the then Defence Minister A.K. Antony, was opposed to it. There was apprehension that the agreement would draw India into a de facto military alliance with the US. The Narendra Modi government has been bold enough to sign an agreement on logistics support, but seems to have stopped short of a full-fledged LSA. To discuss what the India-US agreement on logistics support means and its consequences, we have with us a distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, a formidable diplomat. He's been India's foreign secretary and ambassador to Russia, France, Turkey, and Egypt. We also have with us Ambassador Meera Shankar, another distinguished diplomat. She was India's ambassador to the United States. We are also lucky to have with us Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, a distinguished naval officer. He's former Vice Chief of the Indian Navy, knows everything about logistics support, and is also a cybersecurity expert. So I welcome you all to this discussion. Ambassador Sibal, let me begin with you. What is the logistics support agreement and what does it generally entail? And besides United States, does India have such agreements with other nations?
To my knowledge, no. And the reason why I've been hesitating to sign this for 2 decades, as you say, is whether this will be the thin end of the wedge and lead us progressively towards a form of an informal military alliance of sorts, which has political sensitivities. That is one. The other is that we are doing a lot of naval exercises and very elaborate naval exercises with numerous military platforms on both sides. And if we can simplify procedures for berthing, refueling, this and that, it's not a bad thing. And one should not read too much into this. On the other hand, as you said in your opening remarks, if the US says that these are 3 foundational agreements and tie this up with high technology transfers, then I'm a bit puzzled as to why the LSA should have anything to do with high technology transfers. And without these 3 foundational agreements, the United States seems to be doing very well in terms of building up an arms supply relationship. They have even outdistanced Russia in terms of our largest arms supplier. Naval exercises, scores of naval exercises, land exercises, air exercises are taking place under the DTTI, Defense Trade and Technology Initiative. There are joint projects for joint development, etc. We're doing very well. But if LSA is limited simply to simplifying procedures for, in an accounting manner, in terms of mutual support for movement of ships and when exercises are taking place, I would see no objection. But there are some particular sensitivities which we can talk about when we deal with this question later.
Absolutely. Ambassador Meera Shankar, what does it mean not signing the standard LSA draft that the US signs with other countries? And what does it mean to sign a modified draft called Logistic Exchange Memorandum of Agreement, or LEMOA? How is LEMOA different from LSA?
We have to wait and see because the text is still to be negotiated. What has been agreed upon is an agreement in principle, and the final text which will be signed is still some way off.
But as a diplomat, what do you think we are trying to protect?
Going from the news reports on this, I think we want to limit it to certain specific situations. That is, this logistic support will be, or exchange, will be available in specific situations such as joint military exercises, intervention in disaster relief, and any other situation mutually agreed upon. So it means that there's no automaticity that this will apply in all situations, but the discretion will rest with you, and you have specified perhaps 2 situations, joint military exercises and disaster relief, where this will apply, plus anything else as mutually agreed upon.
Okay.
The other clarification that has been issued is that this does not mean, giving of any bases. It's really looking at supply of fuel, supply of food stores, and perhaps some repairs. This is what the public clarification on this
All
has
right.
been.
All right.
So obviously you still want to retain that degree of independence or autonomy in terms of deciding what situations
Absolutely. Absolutely.
the logistics
you made that very
exchange
clear.
will apply.
You made that very clear. Admiral Sinha, is there a view in the Navy that the LSA is all right and desirable because after all it's only an accounting agreement. When their ships need fuel and water, food and stores, you give it to them, they don't pay for it. And when you need it, they give it to you and at some point you square off the whole thing.
If you go back to a little ahead of or little time frame which is earlier than the says MOA and the present one which is LSA, it was earlier known as the AXA, which is the Access and Cross Servicing Agreement. And it very specifically mentions that it is access to supplies, spare parts, services from each other's land, airbase and ports. What is happening presently is that whenever the ships of any country, when they visit our ports or air bases, the aircraft, it goes through a very long process of clearances through MEA, MOD and other agencies. This foundational agreement actually facilitates cutting short of those procedures. That is number one. The second issue is, Ambassador Sibal just mentioned about that, DTTI, etc. To my mind, what is happening that the exchange of technology, though it is not directly linked, the Make in India, particularly for weapon systems and platforms, what is happening that the American law at the moment might be restricting the transfer of those technology and the benches which are to be established here, the warehouses, in the absence of this agreement. Okay. To my mind, it's not intrusive at all, and after all, the option of rejecting or accepting lies with our country. Yeah. Even when the agreement is signed. Right. So from that point of view, what Ambassador Meera Shankar said, I think it makes sense.
Okay. Ambassador Sibal, one clarification. Is the Indian Navy the only arm of the Indian military which will benefit from LSA potentially, or does it involve the Air Force also? And how tangible is the reciprocity? I can understand, a naval ship in the high seas needs refueling and there's an American tanker nearby or an American base nearby, and but what are the circumstances under which Indian Air Force might need use of US bases?
In a very limited way, as far as I can understand, when there are joint exercises, when we participate in the red flag exercises in Alaska or wherever it is, this arrangement can come into play. But obviously, it will be very one-sided because the United States has bases all over the world. Its Navy is going all across the globe. Its aircraft carriers, which means Air Force, is operating all over the globe, so therefore they'll benefit hugely. But there's one worry that I have flowing from what Admiral Sinha has said, which is warehousing and spare parts. This means that they'll set up a pre-position spare parts and equipment and this and that, which they would obviously keep very tightly under their control, which would mean therefore that their personnel have to be stationed. Yeah. So one would like to have clarification on that aspect, which could be politically sensitive.
All right. We'll continue with this discussion in a bit. We need to take a break now. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the India-US Logistics Support Agreement and what it means and its strategic consequences for India. Admiral Sinha, would you like to say something about warehousing that America wants in India? Would that consist of American spare parts under American control?
As I said, this was part of the AXA, which is the Access and Cross Servicing Agreement. And I'm sure that LSA may be accordingly modified depending upon what India needs. But it is certainly to facilitate the transfer of technology and equipment subsequently, which may be required for the manufacturing of the weapon platforms, defense equipment in future. But as Ambassador Sibal said, a little more clarity will be required on that. And I'm sure the people in the government, they will do the diligence.
Meera, why does the US insist that LSA is necessary before any transfer of high-end technology? How are the two linked? That's the question Ambassador Sibal had asked. Why is it required?
It's part of their overall policy. I think they see weapons sales and equipment as part of building deeper strategic ties with countries. And But, you know, it has not prevented, the absence of these three foundational agreements has not prevented defense sales from the US to India, including C-17s, including P-8I aircraft, and perhaps now we might be buying some howitzers from them. So, to the point that the US has emerged as the largest defense supplier, it has also initiated the Defense Technology and Trade Initiative for joint research, joint development, joint production in India. But there, I think what, the steps that have been taken are relatively modest. There are two more ambitious projects which India has put on the table: jet engine technology and aircraft carrier technology. Perhaps those will require a greater degree of cementing, but we have to see also whether there would be a willingness on the part of US companies who own the technology to transfer that technology. Now it's being said that it must make business sense for the company to transfer the technology. The government doesn't have.
Okay, so let's see how it pans out. Master Sibal, just signing the LSA clearly will not lead to transfer of high-end technology. So does it mean that the two other agreements, SISMOA and BECA, are also in the offing? And should they be signed by India? Because India, after all, sources its weapons from various countries. These, the modern weaponry has its own source code. It's, there are patent rights, intellectual property rights of those countries. Would it not be violative of those agreements if we sign SISMOA and BECA?
I think we have to be very careful in what we want to do with the Americans with regard to closer military cooperation. My own view is that so long as we are not on the same page, and we certainly are not on the same page with regard to threats to our West emanating from China, Pakistan, US policy in Afghanistan, US policy in West Asia, which is not convergent with our interests, there is no reason for us to move quickly towards that kind of a relationship with the United States. And until that happens, you see, we can't give United States the privilege of doing what they want, irrespective of our concerns, sensitivities, and interests to our West, and drag us towards the East, so that we can bolster their position vis-a-vis China.
In a bit. Admiral, what were the reservations of the UPA government with the LSA then well-founded?
The UPA government, to my mind, since one was a little associated with this entire thing, for the LSA, it didn't appear to be that there was too much of concern, but the SISMOA and the BECA, these two were a little intrusive, because that would have given access to the technology in the equipment which are encrypted, and the government of India at that time, they obviously did not agree. But the US government found a method of going around that sort of agreement, and we bought the C-130J and we bought the P-8 with our own equipment, which has got our own encrypted sort of boxes inside. Similarly, the BECA, it gives you for the, if you like, the geospatial, as they call it. So it can get into the the satellite imagery, and it can give you navigation equipment, which we have our own, and certainly not from the American sources. So the Ministry of Defense and the services are obviously very chary about it, and they have at one point in time they have firmly not accepted this. So I see that SISMOA and BECA is not as simple as LSA, and that will require much more discussion within the MOD. And it all depends on the government's policy as to which ways the geopolitics is driving the foreign policy will actually dictate the defense cooperation between two countries.
Okay. Meera, what happens in a situation, and you hinted at it earlier, when the US is in a military conflict with a country which is friendly towards India? Let's say hypothetically Iran. At that point, we have this some form of LSA with them. Can India say, no, you cannot refuel here, you cannot have access to our air bases or naval bases, because this is your action against a country that is of strategic interest to us and a friendly country? So you have the option of rejecting their requests one by one on a case-by-case basis.
I would hope so, because otherwise it becomes automatic. If you don't have the ability to say no where you are not comfortable, where your interests diverge, then it's something which will be problematic for us in future. And the way the government is putting it is that it will be case by case. So theoretically, the ability to say no should lie with us in such a situation. I think for India, it's important to balance, because we want to multiply our options. We see US as an important strategic partner, but we have a deep strategic relationship with Russia. And we have China on our border, where we want to manage the relationship in a way which is conducive to our developmental goals in India. So for India, I think the need to retain some degree of balance is important.
All right. We need to take a break again at this point. We'll be back again in a bit. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the India-US Logistics Support Agreement and its strategic consequences for India. Mr. Sibal, you wanted to say something before we went to the break.
What I wanted to say was that even if you have an agreement where we retain the freedom to decide which operation we'll support and which operation we won't, the problem there is that once you have an agreement and you built up a relationship, then saying no itself becomes a politically controversial thing. Of course, you can say no, but that can generate adverse comments, adverse reactions in the Congress, in the strategic community in the United States. Although countries have done that. For example, Turkey refused the use of Incirlik base to the United States when the Iraq conflict took place. So that is that's possible. But it's not as if it's a cost-free option.
Yeah. But the question I really wanted to ask you is, to what extent does the signing of a LSA or a form of LSA with India represent, is a part of a bigger US plan for the region, rebalancing, as they call it?
Well, that the US Defense Secretary has made it very clear in his recent speech at the Council on Foreign Relations. He inserted what they are doing with India as part of the larger strategy towards China. Frankly, I wouldn't mind if we played that game in terms of signaling to China that there are limits to our tolerance in terms of what they're doing in our neighborhood. But at the same time, if we simply play the American game, and given the huge relationship that the United States has with China, we really cannot depend on the United States to confront China, even if there are adversarial positions at the moment. Therefore, unless we have a meeting of minds with the United States on China's role in our region, which they seem to actually be supporting and encouraging and wanting China to expand their footprint in our region, there's a mismatch in strategic thinking about China's role in our region. And unless India and US have a meeting of minds, we have to be a bit chary about how far we go with the US.
Meera, US officials have talked not only of LSA, but also of joint patrolling in the South China Sea. So do you agree with him that there's an attempt to sort of bring us into a larger plan they have for this region?
Well, firstly, I think that has been denied by the government, that there is no plan for joint patrolling.
Proposal has come from America.
Yeah, but from India's point of view, we have said that no plan for joint patrolling is under consideration. Secondly, I would say that we have to navigate this carefully. There are reservations about Sismoa and Beka. Then there are your other diplomatic relationships. So you would need to take all these factors into account as you proceed. In terms of the US, as Mr. Sibal mentioned, there is some degree of convergence in the East and divergence in terms of our approaches in the West. So that also has to be factored in. I think the final thing is that for a country like India, we must use our policies to build our own strength, because when push comes to shove, I don't think you can rely on any other country.
Absolutely.
Eventually, you have to rely on yourself.
Absolutely. Very well put. Admiral, Japan, which has major maritime disputes with China, has not joined the US in any joint patrol anywhere in the East China Sea. In the South China Sea, only Philippines recently has had a joint patrol with US. Now, India is being offered one. India may not accept it, or one doesn't know. As of now, they're saying there are no plans. Is the Chinese media right in saying that the US is trying to, through this joint patrolling exercise, the US is trying to create a mini NATO for this region with Philippines, India, and some other people as partners?
Well, that is their apprehension. They have been writing in many of their, blogs and newspapers. But then China has to say that, because they are concerned mainly at the moment in the South China Sea, manner in which they are flexing their muscle. They would like to do as much of psychological warfare and publicity warfare. But for Indian Navy to go and start patrolling in South China Sea, I think it's a little far-fetched to my mind.
Yeah. But they also say patrolling against what? They're saying give us one instance of where freedom of navigation has been thwarted by Chinese. So they're saying, what do you want to patrol in this region for?
Yeah, I mean, the question of our patrolling there at the moment doesn't arise, as Ambassador Meera just said, that, the government, and I think that is the stand for a long, long time. Our main concern is the China's emergence in the Indian Ocean under the garb of this maritime Silk Route, and that perforce will increase the presence of the Chinese Navy. Our worry is compounded because of China's collusion with Pakistan, which is not a friendly country. And therefore, we have to be wary about what is likely to happen. He is on your backyard and he'll be watching everything that you do, and he can, it can become a little one more front that you will be opening. And that is why our apprehension on Chinese emergence in Indian Ocean. So we have to be prepared for that.
Okay.
Whatever is required to be done, we should do it.
Okay. But Sibal, you had earlier mentioned, and even the other two panelists have also mentioned, that the LSA seems to may be helpful to us towards the east. But to our west, America seems to have different plans, where China is being allowed to, they've always been with Pakistan, but now through the quadrilateral dialogue, they are entering Afghanistan. India has been kept out of it. And Pakistan remains a key factor in US policy for the region to the west of India. So can we be exceptionally friendly to US to the east? And to the west, we say, oh, we are wary of the US because, what they're doing there. Yeah. How do you tackle this?
This is a very difficult problem. And United States will not change its overall thinking and approach because they're a global power. They're present in every region. And their policies has always been to balance powers within that region and to make all the contesting powers look to the United States to resolve issues, to resolve disputes.
So India is not a special friend of...
No. In fact, they will continue to balance India by supporting Pakistan, and which is why they are not opposed to China extending its influence in our region, because they want to maintain a certain kind of balance, whereas also they'll use India to balance China in East Asia and the South China Sea. So this is the game the Americans will play. It's a very difficult challenge for us because there's a lot to be gained by having close relations with the United States. Pragmatically speaking, there's no doubt about this. But how to derive maximum advantage from the United States, but also not allow them to envelop you in such a tight embrace that you lose your freedom of action.
Okay, we've got 1 minute, so half a minute to you. Do you want to add something to this?
No, I think that's important because as India, deals with a changing Asia, where Russia and China have come closer, where China is strategically entering Pakistan and the Indian Ocean, a good relationship with the United States is very important. I think sometimes in India, we think that India is the linchpin of the US strategy, but if you see the US balance strategy, the first year is their own deployments in Diego Garcia and their other bases, Then it is their close allies, strengthening alliances with Japan, South Korea, Thailand, Philippines, and so on. And then strengthening strategic partnerships where India figures.
Okay, let me take this question now to you. The US is a great friend of ours. We signed LSA with them. We have a special strategic partnership. But here is this country which supplies F-16s to Pakistan, gives them a naval surveillance aircraft so that it takes the edge off the advantage that the Indian Navy has, and supports China in Afghanistan and Pakistan, which is supplying frigates and submarines to Pakistan.
Well, see, the point is that Ambassador Meera just made a point that, when push comes to shove, you have to be on your own. And therefore, if the American policy is independent of their signing LSA with us, so should our policy of signing LSA should be independent of every other autonomy that we have.
Thank you.
You look at the question of Iran.
I
mean, we have good equation with Iran, and we compel them to, not put any sanctions on India. We managed to get certain percentage of oil transfer. So the Americans agreed to it.
So we've run out of time, but we have to look after our own interests. Nobody else is going to look after those interests. Thank you very much, Admiral Sinha, Ambassador Meera Shankar, Ambassador Kanwal Sibal for participating in this discussion. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week as usual. Till then, goodbye and thanks for watching India's World.